All right. Uh, okay, cool. Before we start, we're gonna do no. We got bags in here. Come on. All right. Hope you guys are amped. I hope that got you there. This is ARC1, and we're doing a architectural basics Rhino and NCARB info session here. So stick with me. We're going to run through the Rhino, and then later on, we're going to get into some NCARB information about how do you become a licensed professional architect. So let's jump right into it. I hope you can hear me, and I think we're good. I think so. Seems to be working. My audio is working. Cool. All righty. Well, first things first, how do you get Rhino? So you're going to actually want to head over to Taubman. Well, one of the websites that's super interesting and fun to know is the Taubman intranet. This is an important one. If you look up Taubman intranet, this is kind of where everything happens at Taubman College. So you can log in and then you have access to all sorts of different things, the Zund, registration and spot. You can schedule rooms, laser cutter, reservations, all sorts of stuff can be found here. But also, what can be found here, student resources is a good one. But I think it's computing is where you want to get info. But really, to get your Rhino license, you have to go to the media center at Tallman, not the media center, sorry, the what do you even call it? The print center, the print shop. You go to the print shop and you basically go up and say, "Hey, can I buy Rhino 8, which is the new one that came out like a couple years ago?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I think it's about $100." And you basically pay them. They have a credit card scanner. They take cash, and then you can get Rhino that way. That's really the easier way to get it. And they kind of give you a code, and then you just type it in. So if you don't have Rhino yet, do that. Go to the print shop at Tubman College. That's on the third floor, second floor, and you'll find it. You know where it is. All right. Well, let's get right into it. So you're going to open Rhino just from scratch. So just find the icon, open her up. Waiting. There we go. So you're going to go ahead and hit a new file. And then this is kind of where you set up the settings for your Rhino file. So if you're doing something that is super big, you might just do large objects feet. Typically, I'll do either large object inches or small object inches, depending on what I'm working on. But let's just click on large objects inches here. And basically what this is going to do is just set up your whole document to be in inches. So if you're working in inches, you can just go and type 10 without an inch marker, and it'll go ahead and do 10 inches for you. So it loads. All right. So first thing you'll see is if my computer can stop bugging out. This is pretty much what happens every time you open your Rhino. You guys are probably going to have your properties tab off to the side, or maybe somewhere in here. But what you want to have is the proper setup is to have your layers on top, just the layers tab, which is like a little cake, and then put your properties tab below it in this little section here. You'll find it. It'll click in a spot. These are the two most important windows that you're going to be handling pretty much the entire time you're in Rhino. So it's important to have them off to the side and easily accessible over here. The first thing you're going to see is 4 windows. And so this is really taken from architectural drafting. It's your 4 critical windows where you have your top view, which you'll use probably most often. Then you'll have your elevation views. So your front, right, left, and back views can be found here. This is like starts with front and right. And then probably your most used one once you get into model making and 3D actions in Rhino is the perspective view. So this gives you a Z axis that you can start to rotate around. The other two just have an X and Y axis. So this is a top view looking down. This is an elevation view. So it's like you're looking at the side of something. So it would have a height. And then same on the right view. To change views, you just right click here and you have a lot of options. The top options here are to change how you view the Rhino file. So most of the time you'll be working in shaded. So you can pretty much go into each category and click shaded. What that's going to do is give like a an opacity, yeah, like it'll give your objects. So you see this field is in wireframe, and if you do shaded, it'll give your objects like a surface. So it's better to, I mean, easier to understand what you're doing. So you go ahead and change it to shaded, but you have other options like Arctic gives you kind of like a white box view. Ghosted lets you see through objects, which is important sometimes. But really, especially when your Rhino files start to develop, being on shaded preserves your computer's graphic card and makes your computer run faster. So I would just stay there. But you can see we have a box here, and from top view, it looks like how a box would look. If you're looking down on it for perspective, you can kind of see it from all sides, and then your right and front views give you that height element to it, that sectional elevation property. So that's an important thing, making sure you understand how to view your Rhino. The next thing you'll find is set view, which is an important one. If you want to change from right side of your object to the left side, you can right click on the little label, set view, and change the orientation that you're looking at. Another interesting one for more complicated drawings is the isometric view. This basically flattens the 3D perspective where you're still able to rotate around a Z-axis, but it's not a perspective one view where all the lines kind of converge into one point. Parallel actually keeps all the lines accurately projected in a plane, in a what would you call that? A parallel. So it doesn't have a perspective one point. But anyway, most of the time you'll be in perspective. It's only if you're doing a specific type of drawing that you'll do isometric. Okay, cool. So we got that. That's super important. Another important thing is you're able to click into windows to expand them. So pretty much anytime you want to mess with a window, it's going to be by handling the labels here. So to right click is to get up these options, but if you double click, it'll actually bring you into the view, so you can work with a larger screen. Double click to exit out, double click to enter in. Cool. So we got that. The next thing you want to do after you kind of get your understanding of what you're looking at here with these windows here is to really set up a sort of organization for your layers. So that's going to happen over here. If you've pulled your tabs out, you'll have the properties on the bottom and the layers up top. Go ahead and delete all the layers it gives you. You don't need any of those. The first thing you should do is rename your layers and create kind of a basic understanding for how you're going to work through your project. So perhaps I'll start with maybe a drawing layer, maybe a modeling layer, and maybe a dot layer. I'll get into that later. And then these are just when you work in Rhino, you want to work within folders, or else your line weights are going to be, or your lines are going to be all over the place. You won't be able to turn off things. You won't be able to see what you want to see. The idea is to use these layers to your advantage. And so at first it takes a lot of time to, it's annoying. Sometimes you have to go back in and spend 2 minutes organizing your layers. But the second you do that, you're going to be able to work through your model, not only more efficient, but also be able to understand what you're doing and work more complicated shapes and programs. So once you have some basic, main category set up, like say you have a drawing folder set up, you're going to go ahead and make sublayers. And maybe in a sublayer, you'll have a construction layer. Maybe you'll have an annotation layer. The idea is to kind of start to separate out all of your lines in ways that make sense. You don't want to have a different, layer for each line, but to have different categories so that when we move into Illustrator, it becomes more clear. If you want to delete a layer, go ahead and delete it there. And then the other thing that you want to do is set up a pretty straightforward kind of code for yourself with the colors. So for me, my construction lines are always red. My annotation lines are always blue. And so I kind of start to set up my Rhino file like that. And then you can see you have folders that you can tab in and out of, modeling. We can add more layers here. Maybe we could do surfaces. Let's spell surfaces. Then you can create sub layers too. So in surfaces, maybe I'll have a flooring material. Maybe I'll have a roofing material. That's for when we get into 3D. That's kind of how I start to set up my layers, or my layers, is to have that 2D element, which I'll probably be starting with. Then I'll have my modeling element. That's when I'll be using in the perspective view and building up my 2D drawings to become a model in Rhino. And so within modeling, I'll have line layers and surface layers. So I'll have the surfaces, but also have line layers where I use lines to help build surfaces, essentially. And that's what Rhino is. I mean, it's line work. You really should not really be using just kind of blank template cube surfaces like this. You should always be building objects using lines, and you should always be drawing using lines. And so that's kind of how it works. It really is like an old drafting tool just made on a computer. So you want to kind of think about it like, if you had a pencil in hand, how would you go about it? Cool. So that's that. Let's maybe get into something a little bit more specific. If we wanted to build like a little house, for example, maybe I'll just kind of go through how I would go about that. So I have my layer set up, and I have maybe I'll explain this over here. These are your tools up here, but really it's a conversation you're having with Rhino between the command bar and what you're seeing on the screen. So up top, this is maybe the most important part of the whole program is this command box. So you can see I can type it here and different options start to come up. Really always keep a memory of the commands that you use often. But there's always going to be times where maybe you need a command and you can't think of it, and that's when you look it up. There's extensive command lists online. If you just look up Rhino command list, it'll kind of run through. And this is maybe the hardest part of starting in Rhino, is knowing where to start with the commands. Like a lot of times it's not intuitive. For example, if you want a line, it's just going to give you one segment of a line, which is not really useful. So what you actually want to use is polyline. That way you can continue clicking around and it becomes a continuous, object. So always use the command line, but if you kind of need some visual aid, there's also this corresponding box here over to the left, which gives you some small diagrams that gets you started. So polyline, for example, is this first one, right? You also have curved lines. You have arcs, right? So over here, there's a lot to get you started. The top couple rows are just line tools, which is super important. The next are surface building tools. So this is to build like a 3D object. Really, you should be making them with Lineworks. We'll go over that. And then you have like explode, which is a good thing to know. If you need to kind of separate all your line work or separate all your surfaces into different components, explode will do that. So it's too much to go over all of the commands all at once, but I'm gonna try to run through a few here as I make a little house. And really the idea is that you're communicating with Rhino. Every time you want to do a new action, you have to go in and type in what you want and then use that. So let's begin. Let's say I want a 100 square foot house, for example, just a simple cube. So maybe I'll go and grab my rectangular tool. I am in my construction layer on drawing, so that's good. And you don't have to start on the C plane. You can really draw anywhere you want. This is the C plane where you're going to be kind of putting all your drawings at the end, but you can draw off to the side. So I have my box made. It can be any dimension I want it to be. But if I want it to be a precise dimension, which you're in architecture, so most of the times you're going to want, precise dimensions. You actually just using the command line, don't touch anything. Just start the box, and the command line is already activated, waiting for a response, right? So maybe I want 10 feet. I'll type in 10 feet. And then if I want the width to also be 10 feet, I'll type in 10 again, enter. So it's always going to be, you click on the, you click around, it asks for a prompt. How long do you want this thing? How, what is the dimensions of this, or what kind of properties do you want this thing to have? You'll type it in, hit enter, and it'll make that thing. If you want to check, you can type in distance, right? So that's a good command to know. And just click one end to the other, and it'll tell you, right? 120 inches. That's 10 feet. You can pull that down here to see your command line a little better. And then it'll actually show you a history of everything you've done. So if you ever want to go back up and check, oh, when did I do that thing? You can do that. So good. So now we have our foundation for our house laid out. But maybe, now it's time to put on some walls. So I would actually probably, since now I'm in 2D, like this would let's say this is the floor plan, right? You have your bathroom right here. You have maybe your kitchen over here, whatever it is. Okay, I have my floor plan laid out, but now let's start trying to build this thing in 3 dimensions. So I would actually click out of top view and either meander over to perspective, or using right and front views, I can start building this thing up. So if I want a wall, on the bottom side here, maybe I'd go into front view, and let's say I want it to be a super tall, skinny house. I'll do a 50-foot wall here. It'd be like a giant house. Maybe that's too much. Let's do a 15-foot house. Right? So you start to build your house one line at a time. 15 feet. You see how I'm doing that? Oh, if you hold shift, it'll hold your orthographic. So it'll only do straight lines if you hold shift. 15 feet. Cool. One good thing to have in mind, and let me try to move this thing here. Fuck is this? Down here, you have all of your line connection tools. So you have grid snap. Like down here, this is what happens on the Rhino. Really, what you want to have pretty much all these on. You want the gumball on. Gumball is going to give you that little thing. So if you turn that off, you're going to lose it. You'll be like, where the fuck's my gumball? Just go down there and click gumball again. Smart Track's a good one. That'll judge what you're trying to do. So it tries to estimate where you want to go, which is good. O-snap is good, and planar is good to have on. Ortho will lock you in automatically on 45-degree angles, but that shift key is going to do the same for you. And then grid snap, you don't really need that on ever. That's just going to lock you into this grid count here. So it's only going to let you go 1 cube at a time, which is not super useful. You should use your own, method of measuring. So that's those ones down here. Then the next super important thing is these up top. So these are how your lines connect to each other. So if you have like all these turned off, it'll be actually very hard to connect lines together. And in Rhino, it becomes increasingly important to have all of your lines close and connect, or else you won't be able to build surfaces. So you see, if I have those all turned off, now I can't really lock into any of these. But if I click, let's say end, it's going to automatically connect to the endpoints. And since I have Smart Track on, it's going to try to judge where I want to go from that. So it's always good to have end on, near, mid is a good one to have on, intercept, so that'll know when lines cross. That's a good one to have on. Points, not bad. You don't want all of these on. It'll become like super hard to do stuff freely. But if you ever want to like turn something off to click, in a specific place, you can do that. So that's down there. That's always important to go over. All right, let's continue. Let's see if I can move this thing in. Continue building our house. So we have, one wall almost going here. Let me just finish it just up top with the front view. And you can see that, I'm kind of quickly going. I have hotkeys set up. So my V key, which is conveniently close to the space key, is my polyline, because I use polyline, most often. And so that's how I'm getting these commands so quick. But I could also be going over here, clicking the polyline. So now we have one wall here kind of going. And but we need, it's not a, oh, we're missing one bottom. Okay. It is all open lines. They're actually not connected. And so this is another super important command to start building surfaces is join. And so that's going to give you a read on, here we go. If we see I have all the lines connected, it looks like it's one continuous thing. But if you go over here, it says 4 open curves, right? And you actually aren't able to do a lot of surface building if you have open curves. That Rhino works in closed shapes, and it only knows a shape when it's closed. So to close it, you just have to press join. Join is a super important command to know. And once you do that, then it becomes a closed curve, right? And so now, you could go around and do the same thing for each side, but it's a computer. So the good thing is there's copy and paste. Let's go ahead and just, start to rotate your line work here in 3 dimensions, and it actually goes rather quickly. Using the gumball, you can rotate things. You can type in rotate. You don't have to use the gumball if you want to type in rotate. You can actually rotate things more precisely like this. Copy and paste is, you guys know how to use that. So now we're getting a box kind of set up here. And we can kind of see from top view, it still just looks like our floor plan, but now in perspective, we have these kind of elevation views kind of set up here. So now we have some height to our house. Good. So now what we want to do is start closing the surfaces to make it a closed object. So maybe I'll open up perspective a little bit further. And what you can actually do is start using surface building. Super important command is planar surface. That's going to take a closed curve set like this and actually produce a surface. And that's when it's important to have shaded activated. If you have wireframe, it's going to look like that, and you're not going to be able to tell what's a surface and what's line work. So shaded. So go ahead and since the last command I've done, it remembers one command in. So if you're doing a bunch of repetitive stuff like planar surface, you actually don't have to type it in all the time. You can it remembers what you used last. And if you just click on it and enter or spacebar, it'll close it up. All right. So now we have, we got a box, we got our floor plan below. So we can start maybe even extruding some of these objects. And so if you have a series of closed lines like this right here, for example, see, and this is where layer management becomes important. I should really move these walls into my surfaces modeling layer. Let's say these are let's just say floor for now, so I don't have to make a new one. See, now you can see that my lines and my surfaces are separate. And that becomes super useful because now I can actually just turn off in one click and make edits to the line work. Right? Say I want this corner pulled out dramatically like that. And then maybe I can edit this surface and redraw, right? So it becomes very editable once you use your layers over here. But let's say I want to maybe bring up the bathroom. Maybe it's just a bathroom stall because we're bad designers and we're not making a cool bathroom. So we'll actually connect the line back here, make sure it's its own, shape. You don't want it to have open curves, right? Closed curves every time. And you can actually extrude. So that's a good command to know. Extrude curve. It'll give you the same output as planar surface does if you have closed objects. And so now we have our bathroom and our, series of walls around it. I would move that over to the modeling surface. Modeling. Say that's our roofing. And that's where you see the colors become important. If all your layers are all the same colors, you want to be able to tell what the hell's going on. Here we go. Cool. So let's say that's our bathroom. Good. Cool. So, I mean, that's pretty basic, from line drawing to planar extrusions. I don't know. Is there anything I should show them, Max? The idea is to really get comfortable knowing a lot of commands in Rhino, but also, building yourself a series of steps and a method, an ideology, if you will, to your layer construction and kind of how you move through Rhino. So let's say that, maybe this is iteration 1. it's always super important to work in series of steps, right? You never want to really work on one thing and just keep editing and editing because you're going to lose a lot of your thought process behind that. So moving, let's say this is step one, done. So now I'm going to move on, copy and paste it using the command line copy and paste. Well, actually, if you just type in copy, you can copy things infinitely, right? Yeah, so work in iterations and always work in a diagonal, because if you don't work in a diagonal, you're gonna run into an issue with your elevation views. If you move this down here, it's actually gonna appear the same object, right? Because it's in front of the other. You got to think you're in elevation view, right? So you're like this. Well, you can't see what's behind there. But if you work in diagonals, you'll be able to use all your views all the time. Cool. So that's that. And then you would, maybe go on. Maybe this bathroom is ugly. I don't want it. Maybe the walls are too high. So you can edit these, bring down. You're going to want to bring, lower the elevation a little bit. It's too high. So the good news is you have all your line work already set up. So you can kind of start to edit points, drag things. Maybe I want it to be a half gable roof. So I bring these points up, bring this down. By editing the points, you can just click on them and drag them. Maybe I do want a roof. Maybe I don't want an open thing. So you draw another series of lines to make a gable roof, planar surface. Now we have, iteration 2, right? We're going to move that into modeling folder. We have our line weights. And then maybe you're over here and you're like, ah, shit, the plan is all fucked up. I don't have a good plan. Let me go work on the plan for a second. So you go back into your drawing. Maybe you make another layer called construction A, right? If you want to separate your construction lines or whatever, change the color of the layer. And this is the workflow. I mean, you don't want to let Rhino dictate how you work. You want to be pretty free. And the more you know what layer you're on and what kind of program you've set up for yourself, the easier it is to use Rhino as a creative tool, which is really what it should be. So maybe I want something like that. Then I can kind of just pull this up, extrude it. And the idea, what I like about Rhino, I like sketching a lot by hand, but the good thing about Rhino, when you're good at it, is you're able to really visualize in 3 dimensions super quickly. Yeah, I mean, there's to make things very specific, it takes time in 3 dimensions, but if you want to just get a look, like a quick elevation, how does this look, generally, just pulling up basic boxes and shapes and looking at it, and maybe even in a kind of artistic way. Like this starts, it's simple geometries, but they start to, talk to each other. These 2 shapes, they're not random per se. They have, characteristic of solid and void, and, why is the top open? Like, what could this serve? And that's really where Rhino becomes super, super helpful. You have anything that I don't know. I think that's a good start. Really, you have to get into it and not be scared of it. Really start to, if I was starting Rhino again, I'd probably open it up like 5 times in a row and just set up all my layers how I want it, a drawing layer and a modeling layer and a dot layer, which I never got into, but this is super important to keep yourself organized. If you type in dot, it actually gives you editable text bubbles. So you can type in here and actually connect words to your iterations, right? And that becomes super important with organization, especially if you're working in a team, because your team will know what happened, right? Test 1, you can even date it. Let's say that happened on 10/21/2025. So tomorrow I can get in there and be like, okay, this is where I left off. Let's work from here. So that's dots, and that should be on its own layer, like everything else. So you can turn those on and off as you want. Cool. So good. Yeah, always start in drawing and plan view. You probably start with a plan, general ideas laid out, and then you work, elevationally or sectionally to build those surfaces up and eventually get yourself a 3-dimensional thing. Cool. One important thing for rendering, so these are actually, if you click on it, surfaces. But for many rendering software and 3D printing too, you need closed solid poly surfaces. So if you actually, surfaces work a lot like lines. That's why it's important to work from surfaces and not volumes. This button over here gives you a volume, which isn't editable like a plane is.
You have Rhino 8s. You can use push pull.
Oh yeah, push pull. Okay, yeah, Rhino 8. What does that do?
It does also.
Okay.
Push pull will help you.
Yeah, go talk to Max if you want push pull. Probably a good one. But for you old schoolers who have Rhino 7. Okay, so join, right? This is going to give you an open poly surface. This tells you what it is down here. Oh, and if you want, this is the properties tab. I never really talked about it, but this has all your layers pulled up. So if you want to, you saw me do it, but change your thing, you can go into roofing. This is still open though, so you need to, close stuff off to make it a closed solid poly surface. So with your line work, you add in, let's say, the roof. And every object then becomes closed. Kind of think about it like a real world, rendering is really getting closer to real world modeling where you don't have an object in the world that doesn't have 3 dimensions. Nothing is like planes. A plane is nothing thick, but that doesn't happen. So you need everything, no matter how thin, even if it's like a little sheet of paper you're modeling that has a thickness, and you have to add that in, or else the modeling and 3D printing softwares aren't going to know what the fuck's going on because it's not a real thing. So type in planar surface, right, when you're up here, and then you can actually join these together now, and they become one unified object. It's still open because we have that. ZSA is the most important command you'll know. It locks you onto an object. If you're ever like out in space and you can't figure out what the fuck's going on, just click on one of your things, one of your objects that you want to focus on, and ZSA will bring you right up to it. Okay, cool. We're speed running, but I mean, this is just takes time. But hopefully with these planar surfaces, join, polyline, and how to set up, you'll be a little bit better off. So using the polys, making my lines, then poly surface, then join. Now I have a closed solid poly surface, and this becomes important. If you're making you should really work like this all the time so you get good at it. But also, if you're moving into rendering, it's super important. All your objects need to be closed like this. So, you can imagine if I have a piece of paper, I can make it super, super thin, right? Almost that it looks like a plane, but it's not, right? It has all capped edges, and it says closed solid poly surface. So that's important. Really, this properties tab is going to kind of key you in on how you're doing in your Rhino file. How many open lines do you have that are closed? It'll tell you. Cool. All right. I think that's it here. Let me move on to some NCARB stuff. If you guys are interested, we can start talking about it. Yeah, look how many. All right. NCARB. Really what it means to be a professional architect. What does it take? What does it take? Does it take grit? Yes. Does it take dedication? Yes, it does. Does it take determination? It does. But
money.
Does it take, cash? Yes. It's not a free thing. Let me just run through this real quick. What is NCARB and why does it exist? So NCARB is, let me start down here maybe first to give you guys a broader explanation here. It's a 3-step process to becoming a licensed architect. It really is. You need 3 big things. And if you're missing one piece, you are not a licensed architect. So every architect has done this. Every American architect has done this to some extent. So the first thing, EDU, education. You need an accredited architectural degree from an accredited university in the US if you want to be a US licensed architect. That's about 5 to 8 years of education. If you're at U of M, you're looking more towards 7 or 6 or 8 years of school. There are some universities that are accredited in the US that have 5-year programs where you do school for 5 years. It's an undergrad and master's combined. And after you graduate, you have the opportunity to move on to licensure. But if you're at U of M, you're not lucky. This is not an accredited program. This is just a 4-year pre-architectural program, a BS ARC. Yeah, you got to do master's school. So congratulations. If you want to be licensed, you already have 2 more years ahead of you, at least, of continued education. Cool. So that process, you're working through your undergrad and, you decide, okay, I do want to become a licensed architect. You either take a gap year or you go right into architecture, graduate school. You apply similar to how you applied in undergraduate school with your portfolio, with essays, and then you go to one of these universities for another 2 to 3 years, essentially. The next important piece, which comes later in life, are the ARE examinations. There are 6 exams that you have to pass to become a licensed architect. Now, a lot of people take these exams after they've completed their additional schooling. And it's really the graduate programs really prepare you to take these examinations. They have coding exams, structural exams, general architectural principle exams. There's 6 of them, so they cover all topics of architecture, and you really take them after you've graduated from your master's program. And so you have time before you need to think about these, but that's something out there for you guys to know. Now, the thing you can really start working on as an undergrad is your AXP hours. So there are 3,700 hours of professional architectural practice that you have to complete before you can be a licensed architect. Now, a lot of people in the world kind of neglect, how vast 3,700 hours is, and they decide to do them, too late, or they don't think about them until after they graduate master's school, But then you have like an additional 3 years of working before you can, you could even have your examinations completed and passed, but you still can't be licensed because you don't have your hours in. And so that's really what I want to talk to you guys about today is these hours and the connection with ARCH1 and, how to register and all that. You can run through that real quick. So what is NCARB? NCARB is the National Council of Architectural Registration Boards. Coordinates with state licensing. So you have to get licensed in different states. A lot of them share, borders in some ways, but that becomes important when you're a licensed architect. So you don't have to worry about that too much. So yeah, like I said, there's 3 required components: the education, AXP, and ARE. AXP, so it's actually 3,740 hours of architectural experience that you need. And you have to complete them within 6 categories. So these are the kind of categories that you need to fulfill. And the way you get hours is that you work under a licensed architect. I mean, that's pretty much one of the only ways to get your hours is to do architecture for someone who has a degree. And so you'll get an internship or you'll get a job and you'll kind of start chugging away at this, 3,700 hours to become a licensed architect. And through your internships, you might do some practice management, you might do some programming and analysis. The idea is to just log all your hours super thoroughly so that you can log them into the website, which I'll go over here in a little bit. So, for people who have done internships before or, are looking to do it. So this is a new change, but experience loss value, it happens after a year. And so to register your hours, you should do it right away. But you have up to a year to log hours for an experience. So let's say I did an experience in May 2026. I have until, right before May 2027 to log these hours, or else they decrease by 75% of their value, or to 75% of the value. So they maintain 75%. So it's important to log your hours, as soon as you do them, really. That's all that says. Okay. And then, so really, if you think you want to be a licensed architect, you should probably just create an NCARB account. Because as soon as you start collecting just a little bit of experience, it's good to log it in. You know how the thing works. It's not ridiculously expensive. I think it's about $100 a year. But you have to keep it going for the whole time. So let's say you're in school for 6 years, that'll be $600 by the end of it. But, that's not nothing, but also it's definitely, doable, especially if that's going to be your career moving forward. or maybe just cancel your Netflix. That's what I like to say. If you can't afford it. Okay, so this, if you look up NCARB, this is kind of the account. To sign up, it's pretty straightforward. You make an account. You have to verify your identity with your social security number and all that. I can definitely help you guys walk through that. But really, it shouldn't be too much of a trouble. It's pretty straightforward. It takes maybe 10 minutes to register. So once you're registered, you can actually go see your record. So this is like me, right? This is what I'm doing. You see, you have the examinations are with the same, network, and your XP hours and your education, right? So your education, I'm currently trying to do U of M. We'll see if I pass. Experience. So this is me right here. You can see I've done, 2 internships, and I've made a little dent, sort of. And that's what, you kind of want to work on. I've gotten some hours in different categories. You can see, some categories require a lot more hours than others. Like project development takes 1,500 hours, while practice management only requires 160. So it's good to strategize, when you're working in internships and things like that, what kind of projects are you working on, and just keeping a mental tab of where you're at. It's important. Cool. So that's kind of the path to being a licensed architect. I think, for ARCH1 specifically, for us, it's important to know this, because we can actually count hours for our club. And, for a lot of people, for me at least, it really kind of got my foot in the door of NCARB, and, kind of got me to understand, what is this process like, and how long is it going to take me, if I, start now, essentially. And it does take a while. I mean, you can see I did 2 internships, and I haven't even hit 1,000 hours yet. If you think of a summer, is about 500 hours, full time. You got a ways to go. So it's good to start counting. It's not supposed to be a stressful thing, but ARCH1 can count your hours, so it's important to know. So maybe that's what I'll show you guys next. These are the categories we're working in for ARCH1. If you're logging hours, programming and analysis, project planning and design, project development and documentation is probably going to be where you're at. Maybe a little bit of project management, if you're, kind of helping lead the team. But there's different ways to track your hours, and we kind of went over a few ways at the last meeting, but I can pull that up again. This is like, maybe one way to set up your spreadsheet. You have, your term, fall 2024, the week. For ARCH1, we kind of work week to week. So it might be nice to break up your hours by week. And the idea, though, is to have this running total, right, within the categories. So like I have project development, and here's one for that. Here's another, project development and documentation. So that at the end, I can go into NCARB and bulk submit a report. And now we're going to have to coordinate with Lisa. And the idea is to submit all of our hours together at the end of the semester. But to keep your track of your hours is the main thing, because we're going to need to see the sheets as a proof of what you've done here. And so you can see this is fall 2024, but I also have fall 2025 going, where it's like, okay, I had a meeting. So that's already like 2.5 hours for me, because I'm planning the meetings for, 2.5 hours of project management. And so, every week pretty much I get those hours. And for you guys, you could probably do about an hour and a half or 2 hours, depending how long you're here in the meeting room, as, project development, depending on what we're working on. And that's every week. So right off the bat, you're getting, a handful of hours just coming to meetings and whatnot. But then you also have all your hours outside of meetings, where you're working with your team of, designing and developing your projects, that you can log separately. And the idea then is to, have the sheet, and we have a template in the drive. And pull that up. And at the end, you're going to submit your hours and to Lisa. And through the NCARB here, you'll add a new experience report, volunteered or self-directed. And then, we're going to go through this whole thing, put in our hours, and then it'll pop up. It'll be nice. It'll be rewarding. You'll have like half of a circle filled up. It'll be great. Let me show you the one that we have. here. Itamar made us this nice sheet. Right? It's this kind of some info here. You know, we're gonna need timesheet. So, make a copy of this and use it to your advantage. So you have the date. Maybe you could change that to week. What you did that day, number of hours, and some notes, and then your total hour running. And that's all you need. So, I mean, if you think you're going to be a licensed architect, you're in ARCH1, you want to take advantage of our opportunity to count some of your hours for you. Keep track of your hours. You need some sort of spreadsheet, or else we're not going to be able to confirm your hours. You also need to submit the competition. So if you guys don't end up submitting, or you don't make the timeline, then we can't count your hours. But if you do track your hours and you do submit, like everybody will, you'll be on track to submit maybe up to 80 hours of work. So, all righty. I think that's good. You guys have the room? All right. Perfect. Good timing.